Honorable Congressman William Lacey Clay, Jr. Please welcome him.
Good evening, and thank you for that kind welcome. Let me offer a special St. Louis welcome to a good friend whom I will introduce a little later, our exceptional keynote speaker, Roland Martin. Can we give him a round of applause, please? I also want to congratulate all of the 2014 Dr. Martin Luther King Holiday Commission award winners, including the William L. Clay Scholarship and Research Fund, which I'm honored to serve on the board of. We have educated over 250 young people from this community in the last 28 years, and they have all gone on to build lives full of high achievement and exceptional service to our nation. Tonight's theme of achieving financial literacy, economic opportunity, and income equality is so appropriate for this time in our history. The program features excerpts from two momentous events that rocked the world in 1963, the March on Washington and the Jefferson Bank protests. But tonight is not just about the past. It's about the great challenge we still face today. Over the next few months, you will hear a great deal from me and others in government about the growing deficit of hope and the deepening disparities of income inequality that grip this nation. It has been 50 years since President Johnson announced a war on poverty, but the economic pain that far too many of us still face is stark evidence that the job is not done, and the work must continue without delay. That's why we need to extend emergency unemployment insurance. That's why we need to raise the minimum wage. And that's why we need to pass a farm bill without cuts to essential nutrition programs. And that's why we need to address the growing opportunity gap. And you know, this is not a new fight. In fact, on March the 31st, 1968, just 4 days before his assassination, Dr. King delivered his last Sunday sermon at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. His focus was about poverty and income inequality in America. And he said this: "We are challenged to rid our nation and the world of poverty. Not only do we see poverty abroad, I would remind you that in our own nation, there are about 40 million people who are poverty-stricken. I have seen them in the ghettos of the North. I have seen them in the rural areas of the South. I have seen them in Appalachia. America has an opportunity to help bridge the gulf between the haves and the have-nots. The question is whether America will do it. There's nothing new about poverty. What is new is that we now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty. The real question is whether we have the will. One day, we will have to stand before the God of history, and we will talk in terms of things we have done. Yes, we will be able to say, we built gargantuan bridges to span the seas. We built gigantic buildings to kiss the skies. Yes, we made our submarines to penetrate oceanic depths. We brought into being many other things with our scientific and technological power. It seems that I can hear the God of history saying, that was not enough. But I was hungry, and ye fed me not. I was naked, and ye clothed me not. I was devoid of a decent sanitary house to live in, and ye provided me shelter, no shelter for me. And consequently, you cannot enter the kingdom of greatness. If ye do it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye do it unto me. Today, 46 years later, that is still the question facing America. As we celebrate Dr. King's legacy, I hope you will join me as we forge a new coalition for economic justice. And as Dr. King said, it is much easier to integrate a bus than it is to eradicate slums. It is much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee an annual income. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to create jobs. And if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. Thank you, and God bless you all. Enjoy your program.
Now, if you would please direct your attention to the special video presentation from Missouri Governor Jay Nixon.
Good evening. On behalf of the 6 million citizens of Missouri, I extend my warmest greetings to everyone gathered in St. Louis for this special occasion to commemorate and to celebrate the life and achievements of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I especially want to thank the members of the State Celebration Commission for their work over the years to carry on Dr. King's legacy in the state of Missouri. Your work is greatly appreciated. This past year marked the 50th anniversary of one of the truly great moments in American history, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. His words of inspiration to overcome hate and bigotry were delivered not only to the hundreds of thousands who had marched for equal rights in our nation's capital on that sweltering August day, but also to a nation trying to come to terms with the inequalities so many Americans faced. They were words that helped move Congress and the President to enact sweeping, historic civil rights legislation in just the next few years. 50 years later, his words are still powerful enough to inspire new generations. And he said, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. In 2014, more than 4 decades after he was taken from us, Dr. King's dream lives on. Across our nation, much of it remains to be fulfilled, and the work goes on towards better jobs, stronger education, and affordable access to quality health care. I know you were joined by countless others in continuing to work tirelessly so these opportunities can be created and strengthened. May all of you continue to draw inspiration from the memory of Dr. King and many others who have carried on this good fight. Men and women of all races and all faiths who have stood firm and fast for equality, even at great personal cost. God bless your efforts to honor Dr. King by ensuring that his dream goes on. Thank you.
We would also be remiss tonight if we did not recognize the 50th anniversary of the Jefferson Bank protests in St. Louis. Please turn your attention to the video presentation. The year was 1963. In Washington, D.C., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had just delivered his I Have a Dream speech, and in St. Louis, protesters were being arrested for peacefully blocking the entrance to the Jefferson Bank. A court order had been defied, and as a result, jail time was served. Hundreds went to jail for their participation in the demonstration. August 2013 marked the 50-year anniversary of the Jefferson Bank demonstration, and for decades, the history that was made that hot summer day has long since been remembered. This historic event has proven to be one of the most important chapters in the book of St. Louis civil rights, as supporters rallied to take a stand against not only the lack of black employees at the bank, but to publicly denounce the widespread practice of not employing blacks by many of the major corporations in St. Louis. Tonight, we celebrate those who displayed incredible courage and put their freedom on the line to fight for their belief in the right to equality. Thank you for your work, and may it never be forgotten.
Bringing special remarks at this time is the Honorable Senator Jamila Nasheed.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests. I cannot begin to tell you what an honor it is as State Senator to welcome each and every one of you here to this special event. Today, we come together to honor the legacy of a man who continued to believe during a time when he had every reason to give up. We are honoring the legacy of our great leader, Dr. Martin Luther King. Let's give him a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the question I asked you. Are we living the dream, or are we living the nightmare? 50 years ago, President Johnson declared the war on poverty. Poverty and hardship is real here in America. Millions of Americans are having trouble putting food on the table and a roof over their heads. Today, nearly 50 million Americans are in poverty. 13 million are children. I ask you, is this America's dream or its nightmare? The Voter Rights Act, signed by President Johnson in 1965, is under attack by the right-wing conservatives. The Supreme Court turned the clock back when they invalidated a key provision, a provision that Dr. King and many others fought so hard for. Shelby versus Holder, Section 4 of the Voters' Rights Act, was shot down by right-wing Republicans. Is this America's dream, or is it a nightmare? For years, young people have heard that the key to success is through the doors of this college. Analysts are now predicting that the next fiscal crisis will be student loans. According to Forbes, for the first time in history, student loans borrowing for 1 year surpassed the $1 billion mark in 2010. Today, the outstanding debt is now $1 trillion. Many students are coming home after finishing 4 and 5 and 8-year degrees. They were told that that was the key to open the door of success, to come home and cannot find jobs. Is this America's dream or a nightmare? America has the highest incarceration rate in the world. 2.5 million Americans here in the U.S. are behind bars. Men and women are coming home each and every day after paying their debt to society, looking for jobs, and the doors are slammed in their faces because they walk in the door with the stigma of being an ex-felon. Again, I ask you, is this America's dream or a nightmare? Republicans in this state are denying health care for 300,000 Missourians. Why? Because they don't like the color of our president's skin. Ladies and gentlemen, please wake me up, because I'm tired of this nightmare. Thank you.
Now, my friends, let's give a warm welcome to the Honorable Michael Butler.
It's days of remembrance like today that I truly love. Today I stand before you, the living example of Dr. King's dream. You know, I've never faced the stench and the barriers of racism and prejudice. I have never faced the unforgiving discrimination, never met Jim Crow, nor have I even been stopped and frisked, at least not yet. This is what King wanted. My generation, the privileged generation. But with privilege comes great dreams. And I tell you today, I have a dream today. My generation has a dream. Now, I have a dream of a country in which the African-American stereotype for finances is not filled with low credit scores or with financial success. I have a dream where little black boys and little black girls can hold hands with other little black boys and little black girls and not be afraid of crime in their neighborhoods. I have a dream where African-American businesses are held in high regard by African-American consumers and those of all races. I have a dream where my children can receive an education not based on the color of their high school, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream where state-funded black colleges are funded at the same rate as flagship universities. I have a dream. And my dream is deeply rooted in the American dream, but also rooted in African-American progress. Let us never forget what we've done over the years. Let us never forget that no other group of people have went from general apartheid to the White House in less than 50 years. Let us never forget that a group of people has never went from general apartheid to leading Fortune 500 companies in less than 50 years. Unless we never forget that no other group of people have been a beacon of hope for freedom and democracy to the global culture in this global world in the last 50 years. Let us never forget where we've come from. Let us relinquish the bondages of racism and prejudice and sing the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are all free at last.
MLK supporters, this next special guest is an MLK regular and a member of the commission. Everyone, City of St. Louis Mayor, the Honorable Francis G. Slay.
All right. Well, thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You know, this is always a very favorite event of mine, and it is because what it represents for our city and for our state in general. You know, this is a time where we as a community come together and come together to celebrate the life, the legacy of a great, great human being. And you know, what we do here in St. Louis makes me so proud as a mayor and as a citizen, not just because of the wonderful event that is tonight, but also all the other activities that go on throughout this time of the year to honor Dr. King. It is a great, great event. And before I go on with my remarks, I feel compelled to just recognize a few people in the audience. One person I do want to recognize is Frankie Muse Freeman. I meet a lot of people. I have met a lot of people in my life. I've seen a lot of leaders. I've seen a lot of great people. Miss Freeman is one of my favorite people I've ever met. She's one of the most impressive people I've ever met. We are fortunate to have her and her continued leadership in St. Louis. Ms. Freeman, thank you for all you do. 97 years old and still going strong. And I know, and I didn't see him, but I understand that the former Supreme Court Justice Ronnie White is here with us this evening. And he has been renominated by the President for the district bench here in the Eastern District of Missouri, and I support him. He'd be a wonderful district judge. Best wishes to you, Ronnie. And I also want to recognize Sable Campbell-Jones, who is my Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the city of St. Louis. Many of you know Sable, and she's doing a great job for St. Louis. But Dr. King, as we know, we're here because we know that he was such a great man, a very unique individual that had an incredible vision. And a very bold approach, one that he had the ability to get people's attention, to make things happen, and to provide the leadership necessary to get some what looked to be impossible things done. And he left us with a vision and a dream, one that was articulated very, very well in his I Have a Dream speech of 50 years ago. He left us with a challenge to meet this dream, and we heard from the senator how far we are from reaching that dream. But in order to reach the dream, it's up to each and every one of us individually. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It's all of ours, individually working together as a community, apart from the differences that we all have. I like to tell people that my wife and I don't agree on everything. But you know what? We do agree that we are a couple, that we are trying to make each other's life and our family's life better and work with each other and try to support each other. And that's what we should be doing as Americans. And that's something that Dr. King certainly would expect. And while there's been a lot of changes, positive changes, because of Dr. King's leadership and the leadership of people like him, those that were involved in the Jefferson Bank protests 50 years ago as well. People throughout the years we're standing on their shoulders. They really did lead the way to a greater America, but we have a long way to go. And we will not meet or reach the vision of Dr. King as long as there's any prejudice, as long as there's any racism, as long as there's any hate of any kind, of any poverty, as long as there's any poverty. Until those things happen, the dream is not complete. So we have a huge challenge before us. But as I said, the best way to honor Dr. King is to work together, even when we have differences, to make our city, our region, our nation, this world better for everyone. Dr. King put it this way one of my favorite quotes, and I have many from him. And I quote, "People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they do not know each other. They do not know each other because they do not communicate." Let's make a pledge, a continuing pledge, to get to know each other better, to talk more, to collaborate more. Let's remember Dr. King's words all year round. I want to thank the entire commission for all your leadership, Constance Gully and the Board of Regents here at Harris Stowe for putting on a wonderful event every year. And I certainly want to thank and congratulate all the awardees for your contributions to St. Louis, to our region, and all you've done. And to all you here tonight, you being here means a lot. You have joined the effort to not only honor Dr. King, but to work together to help try to reach his dream. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Please welcome St. Louis County Executive Charlie Dooley.
Well, good evening. Good evening. Let me say I'm extremely happy to be here. To Constance Scully, you did an outstanding job. I did learn a great deal about Harris State University today. Thank you so very much. To my good friend, Congressman Lacey Clay, I was inspired by your words, my friend. Did an excellent job. I really did. And to our Attorney General, the man speaks well, does he not? Then also, I do so many things with my good friend Mayor Slay that we are partners in this regional effort. Mayor Slay, it's good to see you as well. I told the priest, the Catholic priest today, he did an outstanding prayer. I thought he was a Baptist minister for a moment there. That's what I thought. He did an outstanding job. Thank you so much. And to the Board of Regents and to the Commission, you're doing an outstanding job remembering the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For 28 years, this group has worked to honor Dr. King's legacy and keep his dream alive, and I congratulate you and look forward to many celebrations. The Dr. Martin Luther King holiday and our celebration may be unique to America, but the principles that Dr. King stood for are embraced around the world. Compassion, justice, humility, love, forgiveness, and equality. These are the things that make our country the greatest country the world has ever known, and to make our world a better place. Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Dr. King, they all share the same principle. Love is the greatest power. Think about this. Nelson Mandela's jailers were front row at his funeral. Love and forgiveness is the power even in death. We are making St. Louis County a more welcoming place with the Mosaic Project. My good friend Bob Fox is leading that effort. Stand up, Bob. He's doing an outstanding job. Our goal is to grow our region and our economy by welcoming people of all nationalities from around the world, not in a superficial way, but in a meaningful way that makes them feel part of our community. We may have different political views, different religious beliefs, and different value systems. But in the end, we're all people, and we all have to share this planet, and we might as well do it and get along together. Dr. Martin Luther King, one of his favorite sayings was, and I like to think about this, is the measure of a man. And I paraphrase, the measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in controversy and challenge. How do you measure up this evening? This is the greatest country the world has ever known, America. If you have an idea, if you are different, regardless of where you come from, where you were born, your ethnicity, you have an opportunity to be successful. That's why I believe we have a challenge today in America. How do we embrace our young people? How do we make them understand that the future is better now than ever been before? That our best days are not behind us, they're in front of us. So in conclusion, and I say this with great pride and humility, my daughter is here tonight because of Martin. She wanted to hear him speak. I think that's a wonderful thing. Do not disappoint me, Martin. But on behalf of the 1 million people in St. Louis County, it is my honor to serve them. It's my honor to serve this region, to work with each and every one of you, to make this the best that we can possibly be. Thank you.
News One Now is a show that focuses on our issues, our concerns from our perspective. We need to see the best and the brightest in Black America, not just every now and then, but every single day. When you look at what's happening to the state of Black America, too many of our issues are being pushed aside. Too many of us are being pushed aside, and we should be front and center. This is about providing a voice for the voiceless, for the people out there who say, man, nobody's out there listening to me, nobody's out there talking for me. They'll be able to say, News One Now, they speak for me, they talk for me, they represent me. I work it all. The phone, the pad, the computer, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Vine, you name it, do all that stuff. Because this is not just about us telling them what you need to think of, what you need to hear. It's also hearing their stories. News One Now starts in September, TV1. Yep, every morning, I'll be there. We need to have the conversations on the air that's not about Republican Party and Democratic Party. It's not about liberal and conservative. It's about the everyday people and the everyday issues that affect their lives, and not just seek answers, but demand answers and action. Some people said, man, that brother's too tough. But the people out there who watch say, that brother speaks for me. Whether you are the President of the United States, whether you're a community leader, what are you doing to impact us? I can guarantee you, we are going to get those answers. And I'm not going to stop until we get those answers. That's what News One Now is going to be all about.
Thank you, Howard, and I too want to compliment the signer. We can tell she's not signing in gibberish. Tonight I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a friend of mine back to St. Louis. He is a distinguished broadcaster, an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author, and I can honestly say that after having been on the other end of the microphone with him on TV1, CNN, and the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Roland doesn't pull any punches. He is as honest, accurate, and fair, and he has absolutely no problem speaking truth to power. Roland Martin is more than just another talking head on cable TV. We have too many of them. He is the real deal, who has earned credibility not just with African American audiences, but with all Americans. Please welcome one of the most trusted and influential men in America, the host and managing editor of TV1's Washington Watch, and the senior analyst for the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Roland Martin.
So how are we doing?
So glad to see many of you out. Folks were coming up to me and they said, well, you were here in June for the Baptist Congress, and you were here for the St. Louis American. You were looking for this event, that event. And I said, I think this is probably the 5th or 6th time I've been here. I walked into the hotel, I said, I think I stayed here before. I certainly travel a lot of places and go to a lot of places, and I always appreciate the reception that I get here, and I thank you so very much, seeing so many of you. And had one brother walked up to me, he said, you know, when you spoke to the preachers here, you upset a lot of them in the room. I said, well, they got to get over it. I said, surely they should have known that was going to happen. I even have some members of the Black Caucus with Congressman Clay. They say, you know, I mean, I love to come on your show, but you a little tough on us too. I said, well, everybody got to get cut. And so we certainly, and I look forward to having, it was great seeing Senator Blunt here. I expect to see him on the show too. We were on a panel together, but when he was running, and I said, you know, so you're running for Senate, right? He said, yeah. I said, well, you know, many Republicans won't come on my show. He said, I'll be happy to come on your show. I said, I'm going to hold you to it. So when I saw him here, I said, yeah, I said, we'll have you on real soon. So we look forward to having that conversation. I'll be nice. I'll be nice. I cut on the second time, not the first time. Come on. No, just kidding. But again, glad to see so many of you here. Also, when I was packing last night, I said, babe, what should I wear? Well, Dr. King, of course, was a member of the only real fraternity that exists, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. If y'all born, it ain't my problem you couldn't get in. Everybody couldn't make the cut. It's all okay. See, Congressman Clay, I ain't mentioned the fact you're a Kappa. I know, it's all good, though. It's all good. I tolerate Kappas. Y'all all right. Y'all all right. Nice little cute colors. Yeah, y'all all right. So, and of course, when I met the president, she met me at the airport. She said, we got a goodie bag. I said, see, that's very good. Black and gold school colors. That's very good. Very good. It was brown, baby, that was black and gold. I changed y'all colors. She gonna say brown and gold. No, I changed it. But again, we're so glad to see many of the brothers as well. When I walked into the room, I was asked earlier, somebody said, what are you gonna talk about? I said, I have no idea. And they actually thought I was joking, and I don't write speeches. All I simply ask is how much time y'all want me to speak, and I do what I do. And when I walked into the room, this song was playing when I walked into the room.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
Now listen to the words.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
For those who don't know, this was one
woke up this morning
of the many anthems
my mind
during the Civil Rights Movement. You can keep playing it. I'll give you the cutoff sign.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Oh, you can end it right there. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. And when I saw the opening video and they were playing the portion of the I Have a Dream speech, and then the dance troupe, they actually danced to it, and I heard other people reference that particular speech within their remarks. And as I heard them and as I watched that, I was itching to get up here. Because, and it is no disrespect to any individual, it is no disrespect to anyone who likes to quote that portion of the speech, but it greatly bothers me, and I used to get ticked off every year when I was on CNN. They would ask the question, Roland, is the dream alive? What is the state of the dream. The reason that bothers me is because we have defined the life and legacy of Dr. King based upon a single speech given on August 28, 1963. And what bothers me is that we love to quote and show and shout and celebrate on the I Have a Dream portion of that speech as if nothing else was said by him in that 18-minute speech. See, it's real easy for us to get excited and talk about the I Have a Dream part because that is the wholesome and loving and we're all together and feel great and can we all just get along part. It reminds me of if you watch a lot of the cable news shows when Nelson Mandela died. He was portrayed as this loving and wonderful teddy bear, this person who, when he was inaugurated, he had his jailers on the front row, and you heard all of the commentators on television talk about, oh, he was about reconciliation, and he was about love and togetherness, and he was. But see, they had an agenda in saying that. Because see, if you flipped from MSNBC, if you flipped from CNN, if you flipped from Fox and you turned to TV1, this is what you would have heard: he was a revolutionary. What you would have heard was this was somebody who was unwilling to accept the status quo and was willing to fight for what is right, even if it meant taking up arms against his oppressors. Now see, folk don't want to talk about that part. But I remind those same people who on Fox and MSNBC and CNN, if you are willing to call the founding fathers of America revolutionaries, if you're willing to celebrate them for taking up arms against the British to found this country, then we should have the courage and the audacity to say about Nelson Mandela and Dr. King, they too were revolutionaries. Because see, for some reason, when we talk about revolutionaries and their skin has been darkened by the sun, that takes on a whole different meaning. It is as if we start freaking out. Even some black folks, don't even mention Black Panthers. Oh, brother, don't bring up the Black Panthers. I mean, we get all scared and everything. Start freaking out. And I remind those same black folks, you obviously don't understand your history, because if you understand the true origins of the Black Panther Party, that was a political party in the state of Alabama when we could not get on the Democratic or the Republican ticket. Google it when you get home. And the reason I'm talking about a radical idea and a revolutionary figure in terms of Dr. King, because I believe we have to reprogram ourselves and stop with this ridiculous view that somehow he was this great, loving, mild, meek figure who was all about getting along. Because in fact, if you go back and read that speech on August 28th, 1963, you will recognize that that was one of the most radical, revolutionary speeches about economic injustice ever given in this country. See, we have allowed ourselves to get caught up in the happiness and all great, and we just all, and look, we're all about unity and togetherness, but there's also this thing called reality. And as a reality, when you look at the economic injustice in this country, and see, many of us call it the March on Washington, and I always say, no, it was called the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. You can't talk about the March on Washington and leave off jobs and freedom. We can't keep sitting here talking about Dr. King in some delusional, rosy view without realizing that from that particular speech to the day that he was killed, he understood it wasn't just about access to the ballot. It wasn't just about sitting in a hotel. It wasn't just about a lunch counter. He understood that if you do not have full economic equality, there is no such thing as equality or democracy in America. When he was shot and killed in Memphis, he wasn't in Memphis just kicking it with some brothers about voting. No, he was there fighting for sanitation workers. And what many of us don't understand, that some of those same sanitation workers he was fighting for in 1968 are still on the job in Memphis today because they have not received the economic justice that he was fighting for in 1968. They were planning the Poor People's Campaign when he was killed. They were planning to bring poor people to the mall in Washington to build shanties to show the members of Congress this is what the real poor looks like in America. On April 4th, 1967, he stood in Riverside Church and gave a speech called Beyond Vietnam, where he had the courage to look the president in the eye and look the country in the eye and say we have no business being in Vietnam. At the cost of the war in Vietnam was having an impact on the war on poverty in the United States. So to me, there is no coincidence. There's no coincidence that he gave a speech on April 4th, 1967, laying out the economic injustice of a war in Vietnam, and to the day 1 year later, he was gunned down in Memphis. At some point, we have to reprogram ourselves to realize that here was someone who understood economic power, who understood why it wasn't just about a ballot. That was important. But he sat there and he witnessed all the different changes, and they witnessed Brown versus Board of Education, and they witnessed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act, and he understood that it's also about what is happening economically. See, far too many of us have gotten so lazy in that we have allowed the playing of one speech to define all that we know about an individual. We have allowed ourselves to only look at the drum major speech. We have allowed ourselves to let somebody else frame for us who he was and what he was all about, as opposed to saying, no, allow us to paint a different picture. In his life, he only wrote 3 books. And one of the books that he wrote, many of us know Why We Can't Wait, Letters from a Birmingham Jail. But I would dare say the most important book that he wrote, even more important than that book, was the book that's called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. If you open up that book, you will realize that, first of all, he wrote this book as America was burning from riots in the country. And it doesn't take you long in reading this book to get a true understanding of how he saw the condition that America was in, the condition that black folks were in, and what needed to be said at that particular time. And so what we have done is we have sat back and we've said, no, let's really not just cut to the chase. Let's not just be as raw as we need to be. Here is what he said in his own writings. When Negroes looked for the second phase, the realization of equality, they found that many of their white allies had quietly disappeared. The Negroes of America had taken the president, the press, and the pulpit at their word when they spoke in broad terms of freedom and justice. But the absence of brutality and unregenerate evil is not the presence of justice. To stay murder is not the same thing as to ordain brotherhood. The word was broken, and the free-running expectations of the Negro crashed into the stone walls of white resistance. The result was havoc. Negroes felt cheated, especially in the North, while many whites felt that the Negroes had gained so much it was virtually impotent and greedy to ask for more too soon. But then he says something that I think is probably important today. The practical cost of change for the nation up to this point has been cheap. The limited reforms have been obtained at bargain rates. There are no expenses and no taxes are required for Negroes to share lunch counters, libraries, parks, hotels, and other facilities with whites. Even the psychological adjustments is far from formidable. Having exaggerated the emotional difficulties for decades, when demands for new conduct became inescapable, white Southerners may have trembled under the strain, but they did not collapse. What he's laying out is that, frankly, it didn't cost much. He's saying that it didn't cost America much when it came to letting black folks vote. It really didn't cost much to say you could sit at the lunch counter because we were actually bringing the money to spend at the same lunch counter. But when we begin to shift the conversation to economic justice, now it's going to cost. So that's why in that I Have a Dream speech, he talked about a check stamp insufficient funds. When he talked about the banks of justice, when he talked about those vaults, when he talked about the expectations of African Americans in terms of in this particular country, what he was saying is that here you have a generation of people who built this country, who built the roads, who built the bridges, who built the economy in the South, who were the backbone in this country, and then when slavery ended, there was no real effort in Reconstruction when it came to land. There was no real effort when it came to jobs. That if you read the book Slavery by Another Name, after slavery ended, you still had more than 100 years of essential slavery with folks being sharecroppers and not being able to share in many of these jobs. And so here we are talking today about African Americans having the average, based upon the Brandeis study, $5,000 of wealth in the black community, the average white home having $100,000 of wealth, and we have people on television and in radio and in academia trying to figure out, well, I don't quite understand why that is not the case when you have an opportunity, if your name is Becky or Margaret or Skip, when you have a family that has had generation after generation to be able to accrue wealth. When you have black folks, the only ability we had was to work in the post office or be a school teacher. This calls for having a real conversation when it comes to how do you confront the reality of economic injustice. You look at what has happened in the last 5 years in this country, 53% of black wealth has been wiped out due to the home foreclosure crisis. Elizabeth Warren, when she was on my show on TV1, she said it will take black America a minimum of 2 generations to replace that money that was lost. The average American's wealth is tied up in their home. So if you lose your home, that's the wealth that you actually have. So now what do you have? You have a significant number of Americans, largely African American, no longer owning, now renting, and now you're back in the same situation because when that landlord decides to sell the property because it now has increased in value, you now got to go find another place to live because you don't own it. And far too many of us were silent over the last 5 years when we had housing plan after housing plan that failed, yet for some reason, banking plan after banking plan did not fail. Far too many of us were not willing to challenge this administration on having a real housing plan, because I dare say if you're willing to bail out Bank of America and Wells Fargo and JP Morgan, you sure as hell be ready to bail out the people who built this country. We have allowed ourselves to get satisfied simply with the election of a black president as opposed to what is the return on the investment of our votes. I don't care if you are a black president, a black member of Congress. I don't care if you are a mayor, if you are a city council member. If you got my vote, I expect something in return. And so all too often we have accepted cheap talk over real plans. We have allowed folks to walk into our churches and sing with us and pray with us, but not leave a real tithe when they walk out. See, excuse me if I'm operating from the point of view of being unapologetically black, because too many of us are apologetically broke. See, I'm just not going to let any politician, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, straight, gay, I don't care who you are not going to walk into the environments that I control in terms of my platforms and pimp folks for our vote. You got to deliver what you're talking about. And what this requires is a change of attitude for many of us, because we have gotten so happy just having an elected official in our presence. No, you got to mean something. You got to be about something. And I would challenge any elected official sitting in this room, if you want to study somebody who understood the power of politics and money, I say you should go study Atlanta Mayor Maynard Jackson. We have a situation where you have minority business owners who get city contracts and county contracts and state contracts, but they don't have the economic resources to float their employees for 90 days to 180 days for your check to come in. And what too many politicians have not done today is go to those same banks that they're putting their money in and saying, this person has a contract, you should extend them a line of credit to float them until we pay them. Now, I know some folks might say, well, no, we really can't do that. Oh, actually, you can if you have the courage. Because in Atlanta, that's exactly what happened when they rebuilt the airport. When Maynard Jackson was mayor, he called the banks in and said the very same thing. And as those banks said, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, we can't do that, he said, fine, no problem. Pull the city money out of their banks. And then all of a sudden the banker said, hold up, Mr. Mayor, let's talk. Let's work something out. He also understood when it came to contracting that where the game is played, and see, I understand. See, I covered city council in Fort Worth. I covered county government in Austin, Texas. I saw how the system was rigged to benefit the large companies, because what happens in contracting is if you have not been a prime contractor before, you can't bid on a prime contract, which means that if you're always a subcontractor, you can never bid to become a prime contractor. And so the rules and regulations are written where they'll say you have to actually own your equipment versus lease your equipment. Well, if you have revenues to buy equipment, what you're doing is you're pushing folks out who you know can buy. Please explain to me why leasing is not as good as owning. But what we have is we have individuals who are sitting there in power who allow these games to be played, and so the same large players keep getting contract after contract. So what had Maynard Jackson understood? He said, no, we about to break this thing up. We're going to break up the large contracts into smaller contracts to allow somebody to bid, become a prime contract, and the one moment you become a prime, now you can bid on the rest of them. The only reason we tout the Russell Construction Company today is because Maynard Jackson changed the procedures to allow Herman Russell to be able to bid on those contracts, and that's why they can now build stuff in Atlanta, all across Georgia, in Illinois, and be a national construction company. He understood how do you marry politics and economics. And that's why it was no mistake that when he left the mayor's office, not a single major law firm in Atlanta would hire him as a partner because they were still angry at this black mayor chose to have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to lead them out of economic apartheid. See, what I need for us to understand, it is not simply a moment to celebrate and stop working by saying, well, somebody black was elected. No, that's some work after they've been elected. Because I can show you a whole host of folks who were elected as mayor and this and that, and nothing changed. But this is not just about in terms of black elected officials. It also means for anybody else, because if you say you are willing to fight for everybody else, well, you got to prove it. You got to, I'm sorry, I got some relatives from this. You got to show me. And some of us have got to be willing not to get a Christmas card from the politician's office to challenge them on what they're supposed to be doing. Here we are today with the capacity to do great things, with the knowledge to do great things. Yet too many of us have decided that we shall stay asleep and keep dreaming. See, the reason I played the John Legend because I want you to understand the concept of two words to walk away from. It's called wake up. One of the sisters from the Progressive Baptist, she said, don't cuss, so I was going to call this speech, wake the hell up, but I just changed it to wake up. But you can call it what you want to call it. And the reason I say we've got to wake up, because what we have to understand is here we have right now a situation in America where our children are not being educated. They're in failing schools, decrepit schools that are falling down. And then we have black elected officials and Democratic elected officials who are white and Hispanic who will say, well, no, I'm not supporting school choice. Yeah, but your kids don't go to these schools. I had somebody tell me, they say, well, you know, man, look, you out there, that's for the Koch brothers and everybody else, you supporting school choice. I said, no, I have the choice not to have my nieces and nephews be in a failing school. And then somebody told me, they said, well, I mean, that's, so you on the Michelle Reed group, Students First, and man, you bad for that? So let me tell you something. I said, don't ever come up to me telling me what I shouldn't do or what I should do. I said, I support public school, private school, home school, charter school, online school, magnet school. I don't care what school you want to go to, I'm down with it. As long as our kids can get educated, I'm down with it. But what I am not going to do is stand here and support institutions that we know are failing, where we know those teachers don't have master's degrees and they have certifications, where we know they're sending the worst teachers there. And somebody told me, well, why are you hating on teachers? I said, no, I hate anybody sorry. I don't like a sorry teacher, a sorry principal, a sorry administrator, a sorry school board member, a sorry politician. I don't like a sorry parent. So now is everybody sorry covered? If you don't think that education is tied to economic freedom, you have got to wake up. Because we can't have a discussion about economic freedom for our families if we are not confronting the reality of what's happening with education. And when I say wake up, that means you've got to have the same attitude our ancestors had when you had black parents in the 1950s who said, I got a first grade education. I have no idea what's on the sheet of paper, but your behind is going to school. And you got some folks sitting in this room right now, you had 7, 8, 9 brothers and sisters, and every single one of y'all graduated and went to college, yet here we are today allowing our nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters to have school to be an option as opposed to being mandatory. It requires a change of attitude, which first means waking up. Waking up to what is not working, waking up to what is failing. And when I say shut down failing schools, I believe if it's working, what you should do is replicate it. But if it's not working, it's got to go. Because for some reason, for the stuff that's not working, it looked like the school looked like the folks we look like. Largely black and brown, that's what these schools are looking like. And so when people are sitting here saying, well, no, I don't want to support that system because, they're sitting here, they got changing standards, fine, because these standards over here haven't worked. It's simply not working. 90% of the inmates in Illinois jails came from Chicago public schools. If you go to any prison anywhere in America, the leading issue there is illiteracy. We are literally supporting systems that are failing us, that are failing our children. And we are still stuck in this whole mindset of, let's just wait for the next 5-year plan. And do understand, if you think, you do rough on the teacher, let me be real clear. Roland Martin Jr. is my brother, teacher. Levita Martin Marshall is my sister, teacher. Zena Martin is my sister, teacher. Kenya Martin is my sister, teacher's aide. So when I have a discussion about education, no, I don't have to go to somebody who's a business person. I can go to a brother and sister to get a good idea of what's happening when it comes to education. If we are going to change the direction, the trajectory that we're on, it is going to take this generation to stop coming to events like this and reveling in the past and use these events as personal state annual addresses. And let me explain what that means. These events should be moments that rekindles the spirit in us. That if the pilot inside of you went out, moments like this should restart that burning desire. It is moments like this when you begin to think about what Dr. King and others stood for and fought for and died for. You should be asking yourself, what am I willing to put on the line to be a change agent? Because it is not just about those preachers and politicians who stood up. There were people who changed bedpans. There were people who were janitors. There were people who marched and people who walked down the street. They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things because they were not thinking about themselves, but they were thinking about their children. And so I believe that far too many of our MLK Black History Month events have turned into a look back moments. Have turned into moments of, oh my God, look at the great things that they did. But I want to leave you with this, because you need to ask yourself the question when you leave here. What will they say about you 50 years from now? 50 years from now, will they say, will your kids say, man, they just sort of walked through this thing? It will be an embarrassment 50 years from now if they are celebrating then Fred Shuttlesworth, Dr. King, Andrew Young, Ella Baker, Constance Baker Motley, Fannie Lou Hamer. It will be a shame 50 years from now if they're celebrating them and they skip over this generation. So what you have to decide is, what is the mark that I plan on leaving? What am I going to do to be a change agent? And I know somebody sitting here is saying, I don't have any power. I don't have any money. I can't do that. Yet when you look at the story in Virginia, you get a Barbara Johns was a 16-year-old high school junior who said these schools are in bad shape, and she led a student boycott to change what was happening, and that's how her family became part of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. She was 16 years old, but understood what a sorry school looked like. And so here we have folk in this room, so-called Christians, sending so-called Christian kids to school who have no Jesus in them enough to say, I got to stand up for injustice. Maybe you should send your kids to school with the school book and the Bible and say, baby, I need you to say something while you're at school. Because let me be real clear. I was in high school giving my administrators hell for bad conditions. And they knew that, like, I don't know where this black boy came from, but he done lost his mind. And I went to all black school and said, you black, you black, you black, but this stuff is broke. We have to have that level of fire and desire in our spirit to change stuff. And so not a single person should be willing to accept the status quo today. We shouldn't sit here and just simply say, here are the stats. This is where we stand. This is where it is when it comes to housing. We should have people in this room, when you talk about the deacons of defense in Louisiana who took up arms to protect the black neighborhood from the Klansmen. Well, we should have deacons in 2014 willing to go on street corners where you have brothers who are shooting themselves every single weekend and be willing to say, no, I'm going to stand here to save you because I'm tired of burying you. The only way we change what is happening economically, the only way we change what is happening when it comes to education is when this generation decides to wake up. When this generation decides that my age is not a barrier, because King was 25, Barbara Johns was 16, Andrew Young was considered an old head, and he was 26. There were people who put it on the line every single day because they understood what it meant to be change agents. And they understood it wasn't just about their family and them getting ahead. They understood it was about somebody else. And so when you leave here today, you've got to ask yourself, what am I going to do so when I come back here next year and I think back over the past year, I got to answer the question, did I go there, have fun, hear a speech, hear some song, celebrate, go home the same person I came, or did I leave there with a plan of action to say, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on this, and so a year later, we should be able to see some progress. So 2 things I will leave you with that I believe can be a difference maker in terms of changing the condition of this city, this state, and this country. First, I will deal with the issue with economically. Turn the house lights up for me. Now, we spend nearly $1 trillion. Black folks are awesome consumers. We are amazing consumers, terrible savers. So here is a very simple initiative that can be started, whether it's the Urban League, whether it's Chamber of Commerce, any other group. And that is, make the commitment to say, over the next year, you are going to find 10,000 African Americans in this city who will save $1,000 a year. I was doing Reverend Jackson's television show, and we were sitting there, and John Rogers with Arrow Capital Management was there, and John said, well, yeah, we know we got some mutual funds, and we all thought John just handled pension funds and institutions. He said, oh, no. He said, we even got funds where you can get in, you can start your mutual fund at $50 a month taken out of your bank account. We went, word? Really? And so I've had conversations. I was at TV1. We had a Christmas party, and I was sitting around with 5 or 6 brothers, and I was telling them about this, and 3 of them, when we left the lunch, went online and opened them an aerial account and put in $50 a month in the account. Now follow me here. When I talk about saving $1,000 a year, what I'm talking about is $83 a month. What I'm talking about is creating a program that will allow you to start people on that process of saving, because the average person will say, I don't have it, I don't see it, but it means walking them through. Now, I'm not saying get the whole city to do it. All I'm simply saying is create the initiative to say, beginning, let's say, the day after Dr. King's birthday, our goal is to get 10,000 black folks in St. Louis, and you can have anybody else who wants to join as well, to save $1,000 a year. This will allow you to begin to have literacy classes, begin to have financial classes. This may get some people to stop going to payday lenders, may stop them from going to these loan sharks that are tearing our communities up. It may get them to realize that there are other alternatives to have actually using some of these banks. There's some online options. What I'm saying is we can't simply keep having a discussion about lack of economic capital in our country if we're unwilling to start somewhere. And the challenge I'm leaving you is, a year from now, you should be able to come back to this event and to say, in the past year, we launched this initiative and we were able to get 10,000 folks in this city who were not saving to save $1,000. That's how you begin to achieve economic freedom for families. Now, here's the second thing, and the reason I am going to specifically mention preachers, because churches, they are already institutions. Now, the reason I'm saying this, because all too often we get caught up in not even understanding the sophisticated infrastructure that we actually have in our community. First and foremost, if you look at our fraternities and sororities, these are international organizations with national charters, with regional officers, with state officers. We have grad chapters and undergrad chapters. So what we have is that's called infrastructure. Infrastructure. So when it means trying to make it having an initiative, you can go to the Divine Nine and you can literally look up and have 100 chapters in a state to mobilize. So churches, we have infrastructure. We have capital. We have resources. All right. So if you are a preacher, stand up. Now let me also say this. If you are a preacher and you scared to stand up, and you know your preacher is here and scared to stand up, I suggest you leave that church. So I'm going to give it one more time. If you are a preacher, stand up. Now, we know we have a fundamental problem with education in our communities. And in every single one of our churches, we have individuals who are retired teachers. We have people who work in the field of education. Now, many of you have buildings that are open on Sunday, as opposed to being open Sunday through Sunday. So, this is how, without asking anybody's permission, without asking the government, without getting approval, how we can radically alter education for our kids by using existing infrastructure. So what you can do, and this is what you do. The model already exists if you go to, and I was talking about this for years and didn't realize that the Children's Defense Fund were doing this with their freedom schools. Now, we talk about the 60s and what was happening, but we had freedom schools, so when folks were protesting our school system, they kept black kids out of the schools, but they were still teaching them in churches. So if freedom schools worked then, explain to me why freedom schools can't work today. Now let me explain this notion of a freedom school. So you have churches. So what if you said, okay, we are going to open up our school doors Monday through Friday. Excuse me, our church doors Monday through Friday. We are going to let the folks know where our church is in a 2-block, 4-block, 6-block, 8-block radius, that we are going to have from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock tutoring available for children in this radius. Now, first and foremost, you use your members to go door to door. Tell them when Jesus said go out, that meant actually go out. So imagine you're sending your members out and forth to the community on a Saturday or whatever, after church on Sunday, whatever, to every house in a 2, 4, 6, 8-block radius to ascertain if there's a child in that home that is kindergarten through 12th grade. The Bible calls that a survey. This is called surveying your community. So now you have that, and you tell that particular person, your child is welcome to come to our church every day after school. Now, first of all, that means safe environment. Second of all, what that also means is that if you're concerned they're not doing their homework, now you have a way to ensure the kids' homework gets done because now they're coming to tutorial. And what you then do is you say, okay, if there are retired teachers in the church, I'm asking you to volunteer just one day, not every day. So if you have 2, 3, 4 volunteers on Monday and another group on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, now what you have is you have an actual everyday after-school tutoring session for the kids in your neighborhood, in your particular radius. Now, by doing this is not saying we got to go raise some money to build a classroom. No, you have pews. That's fine. They can sit right there in the pew. You're already paying a light bill, so turn the lights on. You're already paying the heating bill, so turn the heater or the AC on. I fundamentally believe that if this is launched and you have, and we know how many churches we got, imagine if you start this and you look up and you have 50, 75, 100, 200 churches that have decided to do this to launch Freedom Schools. I guarantee you in a matter of 2 or 3 months, you are going to radically change reading rates, math rates, homework rates, discipline rates, and all you had to do was open up your church doors beyond Sunday. You can take a seat. If we are going to be serious about being 21st century radicals, if we are going to be serious about being 21st century revolutionaries, that is going to require us to be willing to be different. It's going to require us to be willing to challenge. It's going to require us to be willing to use our existing resources and our existing capital to be difference makers. This does not mean that we don't fight the school board. It doesn't mean that we don't fight for more money. It doesn't mean that we still don't fight to break down institutional barriers. But what it does mean is that while we are fighting that, we're also over here saying, while we're fighting, we're also going to make sure that our kids are being educated and their money is being saved. And imagine if you're a church and all of a sudden you begin to reach out to folks in your 2, 4, 6 block radius, and all of a sudden you're saying, we actually have the after-school tutoring, and we also have the plan, we're trying to save $1,000. You might have somebody say, guess what? I might join your church. And so now here you are creating an education plan, an economic plan, and now you have a disciple plan. And now all of a sudden, if we are now beginning to build and begin to change. So now when you have that sister who comes in, and now you know her situation, now you're confronting what's happening with the black family and how that's being destroyed. Now all of a sudden, what happens when you begin to reach out to young brothers, and now you bring them in, now you begin to affect the crime rate. All I'm saying is, if you leave here and are willing to use Dr. King as a radical revolutionary, focus on education and economics, you could literally overnight alter the course of this city and this state by the actions you take based upon what you do right now. And when we celebrate, when Senator Blount talked about what happened in the basement of Montgomery when Dr. King was chosen, do understand that there are more people sitting in the balcony and were the people who were in the basement of that church that launched the Montgomery Improvement Association. And do understand that here we are today celebrating what happened in Montgomery, celebrating them bringing down segregated busing, celebrating Selma, talking about Greensboro. All of those movements, all of those things happened because a group of people, a small group of people were willing to be radicals, were willing to be revolutionaries. If that small group of people could change the world, if they were singing, lift every voice and sing in Poland when they had the movements in the stockyards, if they are singing, we shall overcome in Eastern Europe. If you go to Serbia right now and go to India, you will see an MLK Drive. When you saw the uprising in Egypt, they were wearing I am a man signs, the same signs they were wearing in Memphis in 1968. The only way we are going to be able to be radical revolutionaries is when this generation decides to wake the hell up.